Beyond 3D. Welcome back tonight to another edition of Beyond 3D, coming to you live from the RPP studios, 98.7 and 98.3 RPP FM. Tonight I'm sitting here in Studio 2 and my co-host Matt Adams is currently in Queensland at the moment. Matt's been up there all this week, spending time with Dr. George Dengel, learning prana healing and more prana healing techniques. I know that Matt is very highly skilled in prana, and Dr. George Dengel is one of the only people in the world who Matt can spend some time with to learn techniques with prana healing that have been lost to the ages. And I know that Matt and Dr. Dengel are both up there in Queensland tonight listening to this show. Tonight, without any further ado, Beyond 3D would like to proudly present a lecture by Mr. Richard Dolan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Richard Dolan is, he is a dogmatic researcher in the field of all things UFO. His first book, UFOs and the National Security State, Chronology of a Cover-Up, 1941 to 1973, was published in the year 2000. The interesting thing about this book is that its preface is written by the noted scientist and author Jacques Vallée. Vallée's preface began with this opening statement, which says, "The important book you are about to read is the first comprehensive study of the US government's response to the intrusion of UFO phenomena in American skies over the last 50 years. Tonight, Beyond 3D would like to present Richard Dolan's lecture on the UFO phenomena. Beyond 3D.
I don't know why I do these topics. There's these broad, epic, it's like the Iliad. You know, I don't have like a little thing that I do. I do the whole grand thing, the whole grand structure of the UFO phenomenon, and I keep coming back to that. You'd think I would just do it smart and just concentrate on one little aspect of it, but I can't seem to restrain myself. I got into this field many years ago through politics. I've never really left that. It's always been my primary interest in the UFO phenomenon. I'm fascinated by the science. I'm fascinated by the idea of contact. But I've never really left the political implications of this subject. To me, that's always been the most important thing. And again, I keep coming back to it. So today I want to discuss what I feel is the grand picture of the phenomenon, and as I see it currently, the real power struggle. And yes, the end game, if there's an end game that's in mind. So I want to start by just giving my assessment of what I think is going on, the major assessment. What is going on? So one thing we know is one thing we think we know is retrievals of exotic technology, not simply Roswell. Cape Girardeau from 1941, probably starting the ball rolling with capture of some very, very exotic technology that did not originate from this civilization. Roswell and a number of other events, some of which have been discussed to myself personally, some of which have not received a whole lot of investigation, but I think have been happening. In other words, I think there's been a program in place. Some of you are familiar with something called Project Moondust. There are probably other programs as well that are designed to retrieve what we would call UFOs and sequester them away to study them. That's been part of our world for the past human lifetime. But it's not simply that. If it was simply capturing these pieces of technology and bodies, that's important. But something else that's been going on, of course, is that there have been ongoing, non-stop engagements with the U.S. military and other world militaries with these objects. So we got some of this material, but they continue to invade military airspace. They fly around the world with impunity, and we keep bumping into them. As a matter of fact, I was chatting earlier this week with Peter Davenport about, how many UFO sightings are there worldwide per year? I mean, the fact is we just don't know. You know, in North America, we have his website, the National UFO Reporting Center, which is excellent. We've got the MUFON website, which is excellent. So those two websites have, I think for 2014, probably something like 14,000 UFO sightings. 14,000 in North America, US and Canada. You have some Canadian sources that have another couple of thousand sightings. I don't know how much overlap there is, but I'm guessing not a whole lot, maybe a little bit. Guaranteed there's got to be more than 10,000 unique sightings in those databases combined, probably more. For every person who has a UFO sighting, there's probably at least 10 that have never reported it. Peter's opinion was that number's in the thousands, not 10. Let's just say 10 conservatively. I think that's probably conservative. That would be 100,000 sightings of what people think are UFOs in North America. Just North America. Just US and Canada, which is only 5% of the world's population. We have no idea of the total number of sightings of South America, because there isn't really a database to give us that information. We have no idea how many sightings there are in Europe. There really isn't a good database for that. Or Russia, or the rest of Asia, China, India. Over 1 billion people each in those countries. Africa. There's just, the information isn't there. Does that mean there are no sightings? Of course there doesn't. That doesn't mean that. So there has to be a lot of these sightings. If you have 100,000 in North America, is there 1 million or more worldwide? Clearly those are not all legitimate alien spacecraft. I'm not suggesting that, but let's even be conservative and say 3% are real head-scratcher, puzzling, genuine UFO sightings. I don't think that's an outrageous statement. So what's 3% out of 1 million? You tell me, it's 30,000, I think, right? It's a lot. Is that possible, that there's 30,000 genuine UFO sightings a year? Yes, it's totally possible. It's probably more than that. This is a global phenomenon. And that's part of the scenario. And of course, it gets no love from the mainstream media. You've got this amazing thing happening every single day, worldwide, and no attention. It's as if it's just not there. I once thought of the analogy of Wonderland, Alice in Wonderland. So Alice sees the little rabbit hole and she falls down, 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 boom, and she's in this incredible place where reality is upside down. Well, we have Wonderland. It's when you turn on your television and you turn on your mainstream media. It's this fictitious reality. You know, we live in the real world where there actually are UFO sightings. And you enter Wonderland, the media world, where this is not a thing. So that's part of our world. So yes, one part of the reality is in the classified world, there's been recoveries, and there have been military engagements as well as a global phenomenon. So with acquired technology, ongoing classified engagements, you can imagine what our national security betters would think. They think this must be kept absolutely secret. This is too explosive. And that, I think, was their decision. That means control over media. That means control over the academic world. That means control over the scientific community. There are people who think, well, that's impossible. And I would just say, think again. It's really not that hard. You know, back in olden times, like the 1990s, when I started researching this pre-web, pre-internet, I think it was still hard for people to wrap their brains around the fact that the intelligence community dominated our mainstream media so completely. I don't think that's really difficult to argue now. I mean, really, who doubts it? We have a handful of media corporations that control about 80 or 90%, I think, of everything that you're likely to see, read, or hear in the course of your day. They dominate it. That's the media. Then there's the academic world and the scientific community, both of which have revolving doors with the national security apparatus. Scientific world, they'll never investigate UFOs if there's no funding, and if the subject's classified, which it is, then that means the funding will be classified. There's not going to be open public funding in the world of science for UFOs, aside from the fact that it's a known career killer, but there's just no money to do it. It's really not that hard to control it, in other words. So the UFO phenomenon is absent from those venues. It's very important. The phenomenon has also created the necessity, I think, in the opinion of the people running the show, the creation of black budgets. Black budget simply formally means classified federal spending that's beyond the purview of Congress. In reality, black budgets, I think, are a bit more than that. Black budgets involve all kinds of financial dealings that are outside government, including narcotics trafficking money, including banking fraud money. There's trillions and trillions of dollars at the center of the black hole of the world financial community that just go missing, and that's part of the picture too. And it's not simply to run and finance the UFO program, although I think that's part of it. I mean, basically, if you want to raise secret armies, then you need a lot of money, and you don't always want to go to Congress for that. If you want to, engage in regime change constantly, you may not always want that to be from your official sources of funding as well. So the whole role of financial fraud in this world, this is something that we really have not discussed, I think, intelligently as an adult group of people in the United States, but it's there. And again, the UFO phenomenon is part of that. I think it's part of the genesis of the black budget culture. Involving, as I just got ahead of myself, illegal financing, criminal financing, yes, cocaine import agency, cocaine importation right here, right in the backyard. That went on, and that's beyond political party. I think we can all understand that. That's Democrat, that's Republican, it doesn't really matter. So, but all of that is important. It's important to generate the cash for research and also security. In fact, I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a very prominent scientist who told me point blank that the research on the UFO tech program is very expensive, but that the money to provide security over that is more expensive by an order of 7 or 8 times, he said. So for every dollar spent on research and development for UFO science, he said, multiply that by 7 or 8 and you have the amount of money for security, which presumably is more than just guys with guns, probably talking about managing media, probably talking about creating massive underground facilities, who knows, a lot of money. So the result of that, of course, is that we have a system of runaway secrecy. And I think as those of us who've looked into the black budget culture, we recognize that a lot of it is privatized. It's privatized. So when we talk about the UFO subject as classified, partly, though, we have to talk about it as proprietary. Beyond 3D. I think increasingly we're starting to understand this as a society that, our government and other governments as well are really dominated by private money behind the scenes. When you look at black budget spending and black budget power, the very few public studies that we have on it have all indicated that the dominant amount of power in that community is not government so much as private. So like Lockheed and Boeing will usually have actually more power in some of these programs than official DoD liaisons and so forth. Therefore, and then if they get patents based on some of the exotic technology, that's their proprietary thing. And it's very hard to get a Freedom of Information Act request out of a private entity as opposed to the government agency. So it's very good for secrecy. These black budget programs are engaged in secret technology programs. That would have to be a no-brainer. By the way, all of this is simply an overview of what I'm going to get into in just a few minutes. Secret tech being, the creation of our own objects and weapons, weaponizing the technology. I had a long series of conversations with John Burroughs about this a number of months ago. I think John was right on about this. He really emphasized this point to me. And one of the key points of the research is you turn these technologies into weapons in what's probably a global kind of competition. So that could be electromagnetic weapons or extra low frequency or high-powered microwaves, mind control weapons, propulsion, materials science. I think these are some of the primary areas that we might see, and there's probably many, many others, where the technology that has come to us vastly far beyond where we are at, undoubtedly, nonetheless would probably give us some good ideas on where to proceed in the area of weaponizing that technology. The one result is that it creates a two-class world. Basically, those who are in the know, this many people, and the rest of us who are like the little kids in the candy store pressing our nose to the window, trying to get inside, who are not in the system. One of the results, as I have argued for a few years now, is the creation of a kind of breakaway civilization. What do I really mean by that? Basically, I mean that you have a group of people who are so far advanced, whose breakthroughs then become classified. If we were part of a classified program to study some ET technology that was recovered and we're figuring it out, we would probably have some really great ideas, some of which would be so great that our bosses would say, well, we're going to just classify that because that's a little bit too important to let out to the world, whether it's through energy or what have you. We would be able to continue on our research. Of course, the rest of the world would be blocked from pursuing that. And after enough period of time, I would suspect that we would be able to leapfrog over ourselves, so to speak, into some serious breakthroughs that would prevent the rest of the world, that the rest of the world would be prevented from going into, whether that would include anti-gravity, whether it's some type of field propulsion or other kinds of weapons. We can imagine, we can guess, but I think these breakthroughs could be such that we eventually could consider ourselves a separate civilization. Could we go off-world with our own technology? Probably. If we go off-world, would we have encounters and gain knowledge that the rest of the world would not be able to have? Probably. Admittedly, this is speculation, but I think this ties in with some of the things that we're learning, or information that is leaking from various sources. So I think we can call it a separate civilization, one that's broken away from our own, and I've believed for years that that is part of the mix of what's happening. Now, one of the things that I could speculate about them is that, if we were part of that group, we would be dealing with the presence of this other, or others, maybe multiple groups, and being militarily minded, probably, we would be thinking we have to catch up to them. And it would be an important thing for us. So I think that's probably part of it as well. In order to do that, of course, that accentuates the need for secrecy. You don't want to tell the whole world what's going on when you're trying to just desperately catch up to these other beings of intentions unknown. Hiding breakthroughs that we have, that I think is a legitimate photograph. It looks pretty nifty. Energy, propulsion breakthroughs hidden from the rest of the world, and much more. I once received an email a little over a year ago from a gentleman. I never got an identity out of him. He talked a good game, and he said to me, this is regarding my previous book, After Disclosure. He said, well, I liked it, but it was really kind of short on the fear. He said, I think you underestimated the fear that we in this world have over criminal repercussions for disclosure. In fact, I think I wrote quite a bit about it, but maybe he skipped that part. I don't know. But he did say, we are having, first of all, for anyone even to have any kind of cooperation with any kind of disclosure, we would have to have absolute 100% immunity from any kind of prosecution, because he said everyone would be terrified. Everyone is terrified of legal repercussions of the secrecy for so long. And he said realistically, none of us would ever be confident that we could have such assurances. So it would be very difficult. I mean, it's really true. Like, we could promise, oh yeah, we won't prosecute you, but then when the information comes out, here come the torches and pitchforks anyway, and that's just how people will be. I think there'd be a lot of angry people once any kind of these revelations came out. So his point to me was that this causes a kind of paralysis. I had another conversation with a known gentleman who has told me that this topic of disclosure actually does come up every several years, maybe every 5 years, I think is what he said. And that he himself had been on a subcommittee that was charged at one point with looking at the legal implications of disclosure of the reality of UFOs and extraterrestrials. And he said the conclusion that we had was that the lawsuits alone would be staggering. And he was talking about just mundane, like a defense contractor lawsuit. You know, one defense contractor might have access to some of this exotic technology and the other one maybe wouldn't. Maybe there's a lawsuit there, you know, for unethical business practices and preferential treatment and the like. And that's just one little aspect. There's a lot of this disclosure paralysis, the impression I'm getting. And I think the real paralysis, when you look at the grand picture, is simply the global transformation that is likely to have to occur after disclosure. I was chatting with a very nice gentleman here who said, well, I don't really think I think that whole thing is overstated. I think people can handle disclosure. But my take on it is, it's not really our psychological ability to handle this that's the key. But I think the real issue would be the transformation to our infrastructure. I mean, the one thing that I've constantly been unable to get away from is if a president were to say that this is real, he'd say, okay, it's come to my attention that this phenomenon is in fact real, and that some of these objects are not made by us, and they're highly advanced. And then, of course, there's a whole zillion other questions that would be asked after that. But one obvious thing that would have to come out is, well, what's their source of energy that allows them to engage in the behaviors and the maneuvers that they do? There's zigzagging, there's instant acceleration. This is not using petroleum. So whatever the source of energy, if it's zero-point energy or some form of fusion or something even better, it's a post-petroleum world right off the bat. And that's a complete transformation of our global infrastructure, probably for the better, definitely for the better, but it's still going to be very disruptive. That's just one thing. Then you got the political blowback. Again, the torches and pitchforks crowd. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be implicated for deeply criminal activity in the maintenance of this secrecy, I have to think. And then all of the other cultural changes that are going to come as a result of this. And then, of course, the questions that people will be having of who are these other beings? What are these beings? What about the abduction phenomenon? There's going to be a lot of people in this world who are going to be talking about that, and it's going to stir up a lot of unresolved issues, I'm sure, that will take a long, long time for us to work out as a civilization. So I think, it's not to be put aside and belittled that this is going to be an enormous transformation of human civilization if this information ever comes out, as I believe it will. So that's an overview. So that's my basic take on the general situation that we're dealing with.
Beyond 3D.
I could imagine that such a scenario could occur. That some insider sees a window of opportunity, so to speak, and starts leaking information, a la Edward Snowden type of a scenario, but I could see that happening. And again, not simply the UFO phenomenon, there's obviously 9/11 that can come out. And there's a lot more that might come out in such a crisis scenario. And I think any number of these types of revelations could certainly be revolutionary. When I talk about is there a possibility of a diversion from disclosure, I say that just for us to keep in mind that the U.S. media complex is very, very powerful still, even though we have an alternative media. What we call mainstream media is still quite significant and works hand in glove with the political powers. So by diversions from disclosure could be one or another types of false flags or just different types of media spin to divert attention away. But I think a premature disclosure is a real possibility. Again, what about other nations in this scenario? If the U.S. hegemonic power suddenly collapses in a significant way quickly, what about Russia? Many of you, I think, are familiar with this. This is Dmitry Medvedev, who's the Prime Minister of Russia. He's widely understood as the number 2 political power in Russia behind Putin, made a statement just a couple of years ago, seemingly off the cuff, to a couple of Russian journalists on camera, and they asked him about UFOs. And he spoke in a very serious manner. This did not seem to be a joke, as far as I could tell. And he says, along with a briefcase with nuclear codes, the president of the country is given a special top secret folder. This folder in its entirety contains information about aliens who visited our planet. Along with this, you are given a report of the absolutely secret special service that exercises control over aliens on the territory of our country. And then he makes a statement that the Western media latched onto and made a big joke out of. He says, more detailed information on this topic you can get. I will not tell you how many of them are among us because it may cause panic. But actually, it's all in the translation. You can receive more detailed information having watched the documentary film Men in Black, and that is not the Hollywood movie Men in Black with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. This is a Russian documentary called Men in Black, which is in fact a serious treatment of the UFO phenomenon. And it's very likely that that was what Dmitry Medvedev was talking about in his statement. And again, as you see him in this video, and it's widely available on YouTube, the journalist who he's got in front of him, she's chuckling. I mean, she's laughing. Of course, that's a common type of reaction. I mean, you often get this type of laughter among people when they hear talk about UFOs. It's almost like they don't know how else to respond. But Medvedev was interesting because he's quite serious the whole time. That's my take on it. But does that mean that Russia would disclose? I don't think so. I don't think Russia's any more motivated to disclose UFOs in the United States. They're massively dependent on exporting their oil and their natural gas. And it just seems to me that, again, a disclosure on the UFO phenomenon is going to have serious repercussions on the petroleum industry. It's only going to be a matter of time. Even if, say, the president or some other powerful person were to acknowledge that this is real and were to say, well, we don't know what their source of power is, that's really not going to stop the revolution from happening, because the biggest obstacle toward a new scientific breakthrough, I would suggest, is simply knowing whether or not you can do it. If you know such a thing is possible, that's more than half the battle right there, if you know it's possible. So if you know it's possible to have some sort of genuine field propulsion, anti-gravity, which I would say I'm pretty confident does exist already in the classified world, but if you know it's possible, you're going to come up with it. It won't be that long a period of time. And bye-bye petroleum, bye-bye petrodollar, bye-bye ISIS, bye-bye wars in the Middle East. I mean, a lot of good things will come out of that, but also goodbye petroleum-dominated infrastructure. And it's a tremendous amount of global transformation as a result of that. So, Russia, I don't think is going to be motivated. And China, probably not. You've got to, now maybe there'll be forward-looking people in some of these nations, and they just may say, screw it, let's just go for it. We're going to talk about it. Maybe that will happen. There have been suggestions in the recent struggling over Ukraine that, I read this, I don't know if this is accurate, that Putin was holding the 9/11 card over the United States. In other words, that he had information about 9/11 and was willing to show that to the world. I'm thinking, cool, man, go for it. Do it. He hasn't done it. Maybe it's not true, I don't know. But would they hold a UFO card? If things got pretty bad. I don't think so. I think most nations in the world probably don't have enough specific knowledge anyway. I was talking about military spending globally a little while ago, and I said U.S. and its key allies account for about 85% of the global military spending. That's true. But actually most of that spending is within the top, really 20 nations. Now there's officially 200 or almost 200 nations in the world, but the top 20 really account for, I think, something like 90% of all military spending. So they're the ones that really matter. And I assume that those are the ones that actually have some specific knowledge on the matter of UFOs, and most of them are in the pocket of the U.S. So most of the other nations really are not going to matter, because they don't have the intelligence community infrastructure, they don't have the military infrastructure that would allow them to have the knowledge, or at least to be able to compete with what the U.S. knows. So it's actually a pretty small group of nations, in fact, that I think could have the ability to do this, and again, most are in the control of the U.S., except Russia and China, which are not. So that's the premature disclosure. I'm going to talk about the preferred disclosure. This is the disclosure that I think our betters would like us to have. I call it their preferred disclosure. Beyond 3D. I see our world right now is in the midst of a great race, and one of the races is between us, the people, and our handlers. So here's one problem. We have, over the last 20 years in particular, greater social awareness, greater political awareness, primarily because of the web. The World Wide Web has allowed us a universe of information that was unimaginable a generation ago. It's allowed us to have communication with each other on a global scale that was not imaginable a generation ago, not even 10 years ago, basically. And now this is our world. It's incredible. So that is a problem. Solution to that problem is control the web. we see this more and more. There's all kinds of laws being enacted in Britain, in the United States, in France, to monitor, in Australia, everywhere else, to monitor web traffic, to monitor what you watch on the web, and to make certain things illegal, to protect certain populations, et cetera, et cetera. But what you're seeing is it's a surveillance that's going on, and a control and a censorship. And now in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo shooting in France, you're seeing certain types of speech in France now are being banned, and so on and on and on. So it's control. Another problem, I think this is at least as significant, maybe more, is the threat of sharing breakthrough ideas and technologies. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference on breakthrough energy over in Boulder, Colorado. It was a real eye-opener for me. I was the sole, I think I was the only UFO researcher there, and there were a lot of these brilliant inventors at this conference working on what we would call free energy devices. They call it energy harvesting. And my imagining is that at some point around the world, some smart person is going to be able to upload their own version of a portable free energy device that allow you to go off the grid and say, up yours, utility company, and you hook it up to your, right? You hook it up to your house and you got your free energy. Is it really that impossible? I don't think it's impossible. And with next generation 3D printing technology that will allow for mixed materials and will allow probably to print integrated circuits and who knows what else, you probably have access to printing one of those suckers and you can plug it in and you're good. Now that's a great thing. Of course, that allows you a certain level of independence from the system that may not be desirable. And so for that reason, now we hear, we get the fear-mongering of 3D printing guns. God forbid. My goodness, your neighbor can 3D print a gun. We've got to stop 3D printing. This is the kind of fear-mongering that we're starting to see. But I really think that the core of it is to prevent people from having access to truly amazing ideas that are coming down the pike. We can't even begin to imagine the revolution that's ahead of us in that technology. And it's moving so fast, so fast. So the solution to that is you control the web and you control international law, and you create institutions like the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, and you nail down intellectual property rights so that some smart person in Mumbai, India, who may come up with a device, but it breaks classified U.S. patents that are in the black budget community. Sorry, Charlie, you can't have that, and you can't upload it. This is what I think is happening. So it's the creation of a global system to protect the classified black budget world that's got the breakthrough patents that they will not share with the rest of the world. And there are many such patents. I don't know how many. I had a long chat with Tom Malone, who is a very, very intelligent guy who's written a number of books on electrogravitics and worked at the U.S. Patent Office for years. And his assessment is that there are thousands of classified patents and a large number of them deal with energy. I'm sure that's right. So you control that. Another problem is we have a restive population due to the, less and less decent jobs that there are. And that's by design, because we're kind of expensive. But people in China are cheap. People in Indonesia are cheap. And so what you do is you set up a situation where labor gets exported. And this is all in flux because at some point they're all going to be robots anyway. China's roboticizing much of their workforce, and there's actually a phrase now called the robo-apocalypse. It's being used by economists, and it's not as a joke. So we're moving toward an era where the workforce is being utterly transformed, and what are we going to do with all these people? It's a real question. People are going to get restive. They're going to start protesting. You're going to start putting in all kinds of measures to control these people. The solution to arrest a population is you create a police state, which of course is what we are seeing. This is long-term goals. This is a long-term goal. Now there's another great race. I hinted at this earlier. Let's call it between the breakaway civilization and the others. I like to use that phrase. I don't know that they're aliens. I suspect that they may be extraterrestrials, but I don't really know. I don't want to pretend to know. But I think they're not us. And there's a couple of possibilities going on in that relationship. One is that we're their vassals or we're hostages to them to some extent. One is that our leaders or our betters are working for them. I do say betters facetiously, I hope you realize. But but that our leadership is working for them, kind of like, the way leaders of developing nations work for U.S. corporate power. You enslave your people and you get a payoff. I guess there's a possibility, I guess I wouldn't want to rule it out, that our leadership is working against them on behalf of humanity, like in a Hollywood movie, to save humanity from the clutches of evil aliens. Hey, maybe. A couple of other possibilities. It could be that we're dealing with multiple groups of other beings, not all of whom are out to enslave us. I'm not saying they all are. I don't know. Maybe some of them are benign. Maybe. Whatever the case is, however, we're at a unique moment in human history. Think about this. For all of the sum total of our history, these other beings could interact here on Earth probably with total impunity and total ability to do whatever they wanted without anyone bugging them, because really, what could we do? Back in pre-20th century, the only way to see a UFO would be to look up at the sky. And there weren't as many of us back then. And there was many, many areas of the world that were uncharted. Now we have the 20th and 21st century with electronic means of detection, radar, and other electronic means. We've got the ability to detect them now. And what I think that means is that the advanced guard of our civilization, that is our national security intelligence community, they've obviously figured it out. They've detected it. We're at this interim stage, and more of us are figuring it out too, but they are thinking, we don't really want you to know this yet, and we're holding on to this secret, but it really can't be indefinitely. Cannot possibly be indefinitely. So I think their attitude is they're playing catch up. They see this very advanced intelligence, this very advanced species that probably doesn't even think like we do, but they're thinking we need to catch up, and so therefore, how are we going to do that? Well, we can't really play by the rules of letting people know about all of this. We're going to have to create an authoritarian system. We have to clamp down our power, create a hierarchical authoritarian state. And then, once we've achieved our goals vis-a-vis these others, then maybe we'll let the people know what's going on. So therefore, I would suggest, before any kind of that disclosure, what they're kind of want to do, and I've sort of been talking about this, they want to enforce intellectual property rights. That means no free file sharing, in the future version of the Pirate Bay or whatever. They want to create a police state of total surveillance and total intimidation, because if you're being surveilled, you're being intimidated, and you're not free. If you are monitored at every street corner with facial recognition, and you want to protest, good luck. In Canada right now, it's illegal to protest with the masks. Not allowed to do it. Is that the case in the U.S.? I'm not sure. Not yet. It is the case in other countries, increasingly. So they want total recognition of you, and the design is to intimidate you. Is to make you afraid, to make you go through your life with your head down and hopefully not to get noticed. The other thing they want to do is turn the web into television. They're doing that now. This is a real image. This is of, I think it's a Samsung, smart TV type thing. So look how they got it set up. You've got your, they're corralling you, they're guiding you. So your Facebook and your Netflix and your Hulu Plus and your Skype and your History Channel, which I was on last night, by the way, and USA Today, Useless SA Today, and all the others to guide your web experience. And this is the future of the web. This is what they're trying to do to us. They call it Smart Hub. No, let's call it Dumb Hub, because that's really what it is. But that's the direction. And then, as I was kind of hinting at, one of the necessary things in the world for them to achieve this purpose is the creation of false flags on what appears to be a nearly continuous basis. I mean, we have 9/11. We have the weapons of mass destruction, the fictitious weapons of mass destruction. We have 7/7. We've got the increasingly number of scares to inject you with all kinds of pharmaceuticals. We've got the fictitious chemical weapons shenanigans of Syria from 2013. We've got Boston bombing, and Malaysia and ISIS, and much, much, much more. Beyond 3D. And the point of these, as I think you now have gathered from what I've been talking about, is to allow the United States-dominated group to engage in regime change that they cannot otherwise engage in, to pass laws that they cannot otherwise justify, as a way to create this kind of system that they feel they need to create. My feeling is that once they've gotten what they want, they probably won't need the false flags. I've been looking over the history of false flags quite a lot lately. And what I notice is that when I identify probable false flags over the past, let's say, century or so, especially since the end of World War II, it seems to me that the largest number of them are committed by the United States. U.S. gets the gold in false flags. And Israel gets the silver, and Britain gets the bronze. If there was an Olympics, that's how it would go. I look for false flags among other nations like Russia, Soviet Union. Don't find too many. 1999, the Chechen crisis was false flags by the FSB, and that's what got Putin into power. They're not immune to doing false flags. A lot of those bombings were done by the security services, it looks like, not by the Chechens. So, I mean, you get them everywhere, but the U.S. seems to do the most. And I ask myself this question, why would that be? Why would U.S., Britain, and Israel, and Canada now, they're getting into it, and a number of these other nations, why would they do this? And I think my best answer is twofold. One is that those nations historically have felt, their populations, I should say, have felt that they are free. And those populations have felt that they have some say over how things are being done. I mean, back in the old days of Stalin, if you didn't really agree with the government, well, you get a 3 a.m. knock on the door and they take you off to Lubyanka or one of the mental hospitals. They didn't really need to do false flags to convince you about things. They just did what they did. But in a system where you have a population that needs to pretend that it's participating or in the power, you've got to work their emotions. And the false flag is the ultimate. It's like the Rolls Royce in the toolkit of covert ops and propaganda. And so it's necessary in certain instances to work the population that way. Now, it's a dangerous game to do false flag. You can get caught. So it's necessary. It's only a few nations that really can do it. You have to have total control over the media. That's one thing. Or you're not going to get away with it. You have to ensure yourself that you have a totally compliant media, which we have in the United States. We have a completely compliant mainstream media. All right, as do the other Western countries. That's one thing. The other thing is you have to have a very expert group of covert ops teams who are the best in the world at what they do. And again, you've got that in a few of these nations. U.S., yes. Israel, yes. Britain, yes. A few of the other nations have them too. Russia's got it as well, but Russia doesn't have control over the Western media. So if Russia were to do these things, they'd have to be very careful. They'd have to be careful. U.S. is in a better position. That's why I think it's happening. And the other reason that the U.S. is leading is because the U.S. is most interested in creating global transformation, because it's in the best position to lead that transformation and dominate. So they're motivated. That's why we're seeing it. That's why we're seeing all of this stuff happening. I included the Malaysia thing there. If you remember last July, that was shot down over eastern Ukraine, and immediately John Kerry blamed the Russians. This is not the truth, man. That's not what happened. That thing was shot down from the air, and you can look at the photographs of the pilot cockpit there. That was not from a Buck missile from below by Russian separatists. No. That was from an Air Force, and that was the Ukrainian Air Force. And ever since then, since that information has come out, you've noticed no one's talking about that anymore. But the U.S. can't really back away from it either because they committed themselves to that position. Anyway, and incidentally, regarding that, which I think is almost funny, kind of in a twisted way, Putin flew through that airspace 24 hours earlier. He had been coming back from Brazil from the conference where they established their version of the IMF. So imagine you're Putin, and you've just flown through that airspace, and then 24 hours later, boom, the aircraft gets shot down. Do you think they were trying to knock him off? Yeah, maybe, a little bit. So anyway, I think this is what we're looking at. One of the things to notice about these false flags, by the way, just to keep an eye out, is when you start hearing these slogans. The slogans come out immediately as if they come right out of a Madison Avenue, office. Je suis Charlie. Immediately someone writes that and it goes viral within a day. You see thousands of the placards all printed up. Who printed these things up? Thousands of them immediately. Or after the Boston Marathon, Boston Strong. Really, Boston? I don't think so. 19,000 militarized police going through your house. No more Third and Fourth Amendments. Not so strong. I love Boston, but I wasn't too happy about that moment. But this is slogans and the immediate identification of the culprit, instant almost nowadays. You've got to be careful. We have to use our heads with these. And let's not be like cattle with a ring through our nose being led to the field wherever they want us to do that. So I think we're become a little more aware over the fact that we're being played like a violin, and hopefully we can use some of the knowledge in being a little more skeptical of these major events that are happening. Sadly, it's in groups like where we are here today that I think many people are kind of wise to things. Nevertheless, when we go and talk to many of our friends and neighbors, it's still not there yet. So I think part of our job, honestly, is to be brave and to not to hesitate, to speak out. What's the worst that's going to happen? People think you're crazy. Well, get used to it. It's okay. It's okay. I think so. This is the goal, and the goal ultimately is to maintain total control over global intellectual life. That's what it's about. Branding over the world and controlling. It's Orwellian. It's out of Huxley and Orwell, and it really hasn't changed. That's preferred disclosure, and I haven't actually even gotten to the full preferred disclosure. So that's the overview. When I ask myself, is there an end game? Pardon me, that our handlers have vis-a-vis these others in their desperate attempt to catch up, in their imagined attempt to catch up. I like to look ahead at the world 50 years from now and see if I can figure this out. Obviously, I will fail, but let's just think about some of the things that we are confident are going to happen in our world in 50 years that people are thinking about. So advanced artificial intelligence, that is past what is known as the singularity, that is computers that are going to be way smarter than we are, that will be able to think and sound really cool and come up with better music and come up with better ideas, and we're just going to be having a major inferiority complex, probably. But advanced AI, quantum computing, which may exist in the NSA, who knows, but we're certainly going to have it out there, and that revolutionizes computing in a major, major way. Complete DNA control. So basically the creation of superhumans. Cutting off the aging process, creating super intelligence, super strength. I mean, all of this, we're right there. Do you think they're going to let the whole world do that? Us? Doubt it. Maybe if you can afford it. It'll be for very few. We're really looking at the dire possibility of what guys like Hitler dreamed of. That is a master race. It really could happen. And it sounds crazy, but actually think about it. Really, it could happen. Implants for superpowers. This exists in the military right now already. In some of the advanced covert op teams, all types of implants are available for them. Organic 3D printing, replacement organs, and the like. Basically, what I'm talking about is a class-based transhumanism, a utopia, as I say, for those who can afford it. Not the best future. In such a future, with all of that nailed down, then we will start seeing a disclosure. This is how their plan would be. So they would eventually start revealing public breakaway technology of a UFO sighting that I personally investigated that was over in Kingston, Ontario back in 2003. Very, very clear sighting of a perfect black triangle with sharp edges over the road. That type of technology, I think, will be openly revealed, as well as what we might call disclosure, only in this environment. That is, after a 24/7, all-encompassing virtual fascist society has been completely implemented. That is total control. When total control has been revealed, when total control has been obtained, rather, disclosure, their preferred disclosure will then come. Because it won't matter. They'll have complete mastery of the situation, and you and I won't be able to do anything about it.
Beyond 333 D.
So I think that's the preferred situation. I think that's what the powers that be would do if they have their way. There's a third version of disclosure. I call a people-driven disclosure. I think this is what we're trying to do. But I think what's happening is that on a societal level, there is a greater awareness among people that this phenomenon is a genuine phenomenon. It's important. And so I think, and we're also in an era now of groups like Wikileaks and Anonymous and the hackers and Edward Snowden. What that means is like they were not really possible a decade ago. They didn't have anything like that a decade ago, and that's because we didn't have a global infrastructure that was able to support the ability to rip digital data out of a computer system and throw it out for the world to see, whether legally or not. It's irrelevant. The ability now is here, and this is what we're seeing in the world. We're seeing people who are increasingly trying to do this, and that's not going to go away. And for my part, I see that as a very necessary and a positive thing. I don't really care that certain governments think that some of these things are illegal. I think that, first of all, it's an inevitability. When you have an increasingly repressive system that's being put into place, and that's what we have, you know, anyone with eyes can see it, you're going to have a reaction against it. And groups like WikiLeaks are part of that reaction. And I think that they should be supported. So I think, and also groups and individuals that engage in good UFO research, yes, that should be supported in whatever way is reasonable. Generally, the population, we have to be a little more critically minded in our thinking. I don't think that it's a good idea for us to copy and paste every Facebook rumor that comes our way. I do think, and I wrote about this in my most recent book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. Just, you know, there are simple ways for us as private researchers, all of us, to fact check a little more easily. Things like reverse image search through Google are very, very useful in many ways. Things like search by date to find the genesis of a particular idea. How did a particular idea or fact first appear on the web? Well, you can figure it out. It's not that hard. You do search by date in the Google feature. It's a very useful tool. I wrote about how to use it in my book, but you can figure it out on your own. I know I'm running out of time here. I was on a Facebook thread about 2 years ago, and I was like, me and like 90 other people got this Facebook message, and there's, you know, I get these all the time. And a researcher had a picture of a giant cyclops skeleton. So it was like a 20-foot long cyclops, and it was a one-eyed, one socket in the middle. And he was saying, this is proof of cyclops giants of the past. And I just thought, you know, all right. So I took out 5 minutes, and I downloaded the image. I did a reverse image search by date, and I found, literally it took me 5 minutes to find out that image was created in a contest, an Adobe Photoshop contest from like 2004. It was 5 minutes of my life that I'll never get back again. But so I wrote back to the guy. I said, look, I just want you to know this is a Photoshop. This is not a real thing. And this is what was disheartening, and I'm not kidding. He said, well, Mr. Dolan, you're a respected researcher, so I'll take your word for it. And I said, no, don't take my word for it. I mean, you just made me do all this work. You could have done the work. You could have done exactly what I did. I'm not special in this way. This ability here lies with you as well. All you have to do is figure it out. Check, do your work. So I think, you know, we can do this. There's a tendency that people have, all of us, and I think we all fall into this, that we tend to accept authoritative information that comes down, and we don't question it. We don't question it. But we have to, especially when it comes from so-called authoritative sources, especially when police say, we've gotten the suspect, we know who did it, we got him. Well, question it always. I homeschooled both of my children when they were much younger. I'm not saying everyone should homeschool, but I think it was a great decision for us. In other words, what I'm suggesting is, to the extent that you are able to opt out of the great encompassing system that just wants to chew you up and spit you out, then do it. It's not possible for everyone, but there's things to do. If you're able to make a living while running your own business and doing your own, following your dream, I say do it. Absolutely do it. This is your life. This is your opportunity. Why spend your life feeding the machine when you have an opportunity to be independent? It's hard. I mean, I made many, many sacrifices. I've always worked for myself, always. And I'm sure I've taken a financial hit, but I look back, I have no regrets over that. And I've been able to maintain my own independence, which has been important for me as a researcher. Engaging in pragmatic citizen action when possible, focused citizen action, support a free web, inspire people, inspire others. I think it's probably the most important thing we can do is to, again, be brave and realize that we all have the ability to inspire those of us around us. 20 years ago, a little more than that, I started looking at the UFO phenomenon, and I did have the thought, how can I possibly think that I could write about this subject when there are all of these other people who've written so much more, they know so much more about this than I. Who am I to think that I could put myself up there and write my own ideas out there? I mean, that's arrogant. And I really did have this thought, but for whatever reason, I went ahead and I did it. And I'm glad that I did it. And I get to talk here to all of you today. But I would say that if you're in a situation where you're thinking the same thought, put the thought away. Go out there and just do it. The worst that happens is it doesn't turn out the way you want, but that's okay. You've at least given it a try. And you probably will inspire other people along the way. So the last thing I'll say is that any kind of disclosure event that happens, and I've got 5 minutes to go here, so I'm going to wrap this up, is probably going to trigger massive unrest in a lot of other ways. I mean, think about it. If we learn that the government or the governments of the world have been lying to us about this topic, this big, important topic of the presence of others here on planet Earth, we'll be asking, what else have you lied about? And, remember Occupy Wall Street, what about Occupy Area 51, Occupy Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Occupy Washington? Yeah, it could happen. A lot of questions will come up. I'm going to skip by this because I just want to hit one more. Well, basically quickly, I think what we'll have to do in a post-disclosure world, I think it'll see a major house cleaning. This is what I would like to see. I would like to see a major house cleaning. That is, political blowback, finding out, have you kept this secret from us all this time? And yes, there would have to be some kind of very, very significant legal repercussions as a result. We have to kill the black budget, the whole culture of the black budget, which is anathema to any kind of freedom-loving people, to have a system of all of your money, my money, going into an unaccountable system that's basically involved in criminal acts. Declassifying the patented energy technologies that are holding our future hostage from us, and to kill the stranglehold on our world by petroleum, which I hope you understand by now. My lecture has explained this caused a lot of pain and a lot of grief in this world, and ending the UFO secrecy can go a long way toward ending the petroleum dominance of our world. Shining a light on criminality. I'd like to see killing privatized, centralized, fractional reserve banking. Hey, that's just me. I figure once you're cleaning house, just do the whole thing and start over, and do much more. That's good. I don't know how easy this is going to be. I think it'll take generations, centuries. It'll be messy. It won't be easy. I'm not saying we're going to hit utopia. I'm not a utopian. I think it'll be very, very unpleasant for a while. But what's the alternative? The alternative is just going the way we are, which is a series of lies and pain and suffering and millions and billions of people living a life of privation. So that's not good either. I think we can do better. The final question is, what are we dealing with? Who are these other beings that we're dealing with? Linda Moulton-Howe in her last lecture, I think, was very brilliant in talking about one possibility. I don't know what the possibilities of these beings are. I mean, there's a number. I do think extraterrestrial is a very, very strong possibility. Are they grays? Are they humanoid? That image on the bottom there is from a case from 1994 in Australia. Looks like a good case. I think, as I said earlier, they've been here probably a long time. If we're to take the reports seriously that we have of various encounters, they're intensely telepathic. They are way different than us intellectually. They probably have a different type of society. One of the best descriptions I came across is almost like a beehive type of mentality. They don't appear, at least this is from abductees talking, they don't have the kind of individualism that we like to think that we have. If they're all reading each other's thoughts, it might be a little bit different for them to have the type of individualism that we have. I guess also that they may not have the same kind of emotional reactions that we have. We being mammals who are raised bonding with our mothers for several years, receiving unconditional love from our earliest moment that we're alive, and having a desire to achieve unconditional love for the rest of our lives. What if you don't have that? What if you're raised in an artificial type of environment, or if you're genetically created, or if, all kinds of possibilities. They may not have our emotional reactions. They may find our emotions fascinating, incomprehensible perhaps. Maybe that's one reason we're interesting to them. But if that's what they are, then we may really be at a loss of trying to deal with them very easily. We may never really have the ability truly to understand them in a way. And what if they have a mastery of space and time in ways that we quite just don't have? We perceive reality through space and through time. That's the way our brains order reality. We do understand mathematically that space and time don't quite work that way. What if they have a mastery over space and time intrinsically, intellectually, that we don't have? There's just all kinds of possibilities. It may be difficult. I sometimes think that we'll really never truly understand who we're dealing with. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, but whether we'll actually succeed, I don't know. So therefore, are we ready for open contact? I would say we're never going to be ready for open contact, but that will not stop it. Won't stop it. Just because we are not ready for something doesn't mean it won't happen. We're on a train. This is how I see it. Our civilization's on a high-speed train, and there's no getting off. There's a destination ahead of us, and we're going to reach that destination, like it or not. I don't think there's a lot we can do to stop it at this point. Wow, how did that happen? I would like to thank you very, very much for your time. It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks very much.
Beyond 3D.
Welcome back tonight to Beyond 3D, and that was all we have time for, unfortunately. Do be sure to check out our Facebook page, which is Beyond the number 3, a hyphen and the letter D. Next week, Matt will be back, and I look forward to everything that he has to share with his adventures up in Queensland this past week. If you have any suggestions for the show for next week, do be sure to contact us on Facebook. And that is all we have time for tonight. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.